Hello, what's your name?
This is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Who are you?
Me? Oh,
What's your name?
I'm Ben. My name is Ben.
Ben. So this is Ben and Chris.
The Popstorian Podcast with Chris and Ben.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
Greatest crash in the history of the New York Stock Exchange and market.
A date which will live in infamy.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
What are you supposed to do when you see the flash? Duck and cover.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Might have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dog.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The evil of the thriller. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
Great power comes great responsibility.
Sorry we've been gone for such a long time. There's been a lot going on in our lives.
It has, and unfortunately, we have reached the end of this series.
We have. This is a very sad episode. And unfortunately, kind of a sad movie, too.
So, whose choice was it to make No Country for Old Men our last our last series film?
I think it was unanimous, Chris.
I think you're probably right. I had never actually seen this movie, and I'd been wanting to see it for a long time.
Yeah.
So we finally come up with an excuse to actually see the movie.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bad movie. It's a good movie, well made.
I think it's well, yeah, we can get into the evaluation of it. Do you want to talk
Yeah.
a little bit about any kind of like Popstorian housekeeping notes? This is the Popstorian podcast, by the way, in case you were lost or you forgot in the intervening weeks and months since we released an episode.
Yeah. Well, I would say we're probably taking a hiatus even longer than the previous one. So this is the last episode of our Westerns by the Decade series. This is our 11th. Is it our 11th episode?
I think so, yeah.
We have covered Westerns from 1903 to this film, which was in 2007, if I recall correctly. And so that is 104 years of Westerns in American history. Which
Amazing.
I think that's pretty cool.
Amazing. There were times on this journey when it didn't seem like we would get this far, but we have.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your favorite film? We watched 11 films.
Ooh, I got to think about it for a second. It's definitely it's different depending on what kind of a experience, because there's some films that really surprised me with how good they were, and there's some films like Hell's Hinges. Hell's Hinges completely knocked me on my backside with how good it was.
Yeah.
Then there were other films that I thought would be better, like Covered Wagon. And films like this one that we just watched, No Country for Old Men, and
Silverado for me fits that category. There was definitely a film I wanted to watch, and the clips I had seen, it looked like a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was a good movie, but it's still kind of flattened. It was kind of flattened parts.
Right.
So.
Well, I was going to say, shoot. My Darling Clementine. There we go. I don't know why my brain is getting old.
Uh-huh.
But My Darling Clementine and No Country for Old Men, I knew going in they were going to be good movies.
Right.
So
right.
I wasn't surprised by either of those movies, in a way. Because I expected them to be really well done. And they were.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but having to pick a favorite, probably The Wild Bunch. predictably.
Well, of course, that's like one of your favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
And that was a good movie. I think I bashed it pretty hard when we talked about it. But I did enjoy it. I'd say surprised. I was kind of surprised to say this, but I think my favorite film that we watched was actually Tombstone.
Oh yeah, you were quite a big fan of that one.
I really enjoyed it. I feel like it was the pinnacle of like everything we had talked about in previous films kind of coming together. And that's what a Western should be after 100 years.
It did feel like a strong closer to the series in a way that No Country for Old Men doesn't.
So we keep kind of coming back to that. Let's tell us how you really feel about No Country for Old Men.
Westerns by the decade.
Well, do we want to do our traditional long rambling synopsis?
We probably should, finish the series out with such a thing.
Alrighty, so let's get down to it. Were you disappointed by High Plains Drifter? Because I was.
High Plains Drifter, I was disappointed. I kind of liked the whole mysterious stranger, possibly supernatural element to it.
Yeah, I just felt like they didn't flesh it out enough.
But it wasn't as well done as some of Clint Eastwood's other films were, and I kind of regret not putting another Clint Eastwood film out there.
Josie Wales. Josie Wales. Had something in my throat.
There were so many other options. We could have watched Unforgiven for the 90s, but then we wouldn't see Tombstone. We could have done Outlaw Josie Wales. But there were other options, and I feel like there
were so many choices, but I feel like we learned so much over this season.
Yeah.
I feel like we've grown a lot as podcast hosts and Western viewers.
Yeah, and I had never seen so many, like we only watched 3 silent films, but I had not seen only but a handful of silent films before this. So I really enjoyed watching Hell's Hinges and The Great Train Robbery. And yes, even though we laughed quite a bit of the Covered Wagon.
Yes, there's a lot to enjoy in that too.
I enjoyed seeing these older films and kind of experiencing the films in a way that I'd not done.
Yeah.
Simply because I had not watched a lot of silent films.
Yeah. So that interruption was brought to you by every movie we just watched. Now, on to No Country for Old Men.
So, this is going to be fun because this is a rambling movie anyway.
It is. It's interesting. It opens with the bad guy being captured, which I think is an interesting image, especially when contrasted with the ending image that we'll get into later. But it begins with the bad guy being captured, and a policeman, or a sheriff, I guess, sheriff's deputy, putting him in the back of a car and taking him with some sort of oxygen tank with a pneumatic hose on the end. And pretty quickly we see that this person who's been captured is a serious and deadly enemy. He manages to quite easily escape and murder the deputy sinisterly. It's a very brutal kill to open the film, and definitely sets the tone for the violence. It's a very violent film.
Yeah.
So it kind of sets the tone. At this point, I don't think we know anything about him, the villain. We have some narration from Tommy Lee Jones' sheriff character.
Yeah, talking about his career in kind of ending up as sheriff in a very different time period.
Yeah, and his family legacy of people in his family being part of the law enforcement legacy of the West.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the big things that make this a Western, because this is actually taking place rather unusually from other films that we watch. It doesn't take place in that normal time span of right after the Civil War as being a Western. The nostalgia that Tommy Lee Jones's character plays here kind of plays into that, what makes it more of a Western genre. That theme.
It is a bit of a period piece, I think. I think it's set in the 80s. Is that right?
The 70s. It takes place in the 1970s.
1970s, okay.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell in a way, because it seems like a lot of these rural places, or if you've been to places in rural America, feel like a time capsule.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel heavily modified from the world as it looked in 2008. But there's a few things, hairstyles and cars, that are different.
Yeah. Especially the cars.
Yeah. But a lot of the architecture and stuff hasn't really changed significantly since the 70s.
Yeah.
Or the landscape.
That's true. That kind of that desert to South Texas landscape.
So how do we get into the introduction of Josh Brolin's character? I feel like that's the next thing that happens.
Yeah, he's out hunting out in the desert, and he shoots is it a pronghorn or a deer? I forget. I think it's a deer. He shoots, and he's tracking it, and comes across a crime scene. He finds a truck full of drugs, a lot of dead bodies, a kind of survivor who's in really bad shape and wanting water. And then he tracks down someone else who was still alive and finds out that he's carrying a case full of money. So he takes the money and goes back to his trailer. And then I guess he gets a fit of the conscience and goes back out to give water to that one survivor sitting in the truck. And when he's out there, he is discovered by unknown assailants and is running for his life, which kind of starts the chase that will continue throughout the film.
It's not exactly clear to me how our opening villain, Javier Bardem's character, Shigar, is that how it's said?
Sugar. Yeah. And Anton Sugar.
Anton, it's not exactly clear how he's involved in this deal, but he does meet a couple executives who are executives, if you will. I don't know that they're really executives, but they're the higher ups in this drug deal. He meets them out at the crime scene, and they're trying to hire him to resolve the case of the disappearing money, and he ends up murdering both of them and going out on his own to hunt Llewellyn Moss, Josh Brolin's character, to track down the money for himself.
Yeah, they really don't make that overtly clear on who he's working for and why he's tracking Josh Brolin, other than looking for the money. And he's not interested in the money, though. He's interested in the hunt.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember from the book, because I actually have read the book as well, but it's been a few years, and I can't remember if they go into great detail. I don't think they do, actually, about the business side of it and who hires him and why he's out there.
Yeah.
But I can't really remember for sure.
It's definitely not the most important part of the film.
No.
The actual
it would make things a little clearer.
But the chase and the hunt is very well done. The film uses a lot of silence, a lot of long pauses and suspense. It's very artfully done, suspense-wise. It's deceptively simple.
There's very little music in the film, from what I
About
noticed.
16 minutes worth of music, allegedly, which is quite little. There's a brilliant scene where Anton stops for gas, and he has an interaction with a gas store owner, where he kind of questions this guy's life. Says he's asking him if he built this business, and he kind of the guy tries to blow him off with casual conversation and pleasantries, and Anton kind of blows past those and basically he's threatening to kill the guy, but gives him a chance to get out of it through a coin toss. And that's kind of a recurring motif throughout the film, is his this murderer's code of I don't know, ethics is not the right word. His code of conduct.
Kind of lets chance decide.
Right. But it's a remarkable scene. There's not much that happens in it. There's a master shot, a wide angle, and then 2 close-ups over the shoulder of each, and a tiny dolly push that is so subtle I didn't even notice it until it was pointed out to me reading about the film later. It's a very slow camera push in. Very simple scene, but very effective in establishing the character of the villain. And I think we established the character of the, I don't know, I guess the opposite end of the spectrum. Or would you say the opposite end of the spectrum is the sheriff?
Yeah. It's almost naive in certain ways. Where he's kind of like, this is crazy. What crazy things are happening in the world? He's reading the paper as his deputy is telling him about the case. He doesn't even want to visit the crime scene. He's like, I just don't want to see that. He
does go to the crime scene at one point in the film.
He will. Yeah, he will go to the crime scene.
They keep asking him to go back, and he never does.
Exactly. Yeah. Even when there's a scene in the film where he sees the truck driving with the dead bodies from the crime scene, and the flap is up. He chases him down. He's like ties it down. He's like, you don't need to show that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's reading the paper in this one scene with the deputy, and he's telling him about this crime that they just discovered in the paper. And he's just like, can you believe what's going on in the world? And then when it's all said and done, he just kind of wants to retire and get away from it all.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is an interesting juxtaposition that he just kind of doesn't want to face that kind of evil. Yeah. Whereas Javier Bardem's character almost revels in it.
Right. He's like, come to terms with it.
This is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the...
Or Josh Brolin's character. We should say, I don't think we've said the sheriff is played by Tommy Lee Jones.
Yes.
And Josh Brolin has a wife character played by Kelly MacDonald. Is that her name?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Carla Jean. That's her name.
What is it?
Carla Jean is the character.
Carla Jean, yeah.
But Brolin's character is kind of the one that I started to root for. He's trying to outwit both Javier Bardem's character and the various parties involved in the drug deal who are trying to chase him down as well.
Yeah, well, I think he's probably your classic Western hero kind of idea. He's going to take on the world, but he's going to do it his way. And so you kind of naturally want to root for him.
Yeah, and he's quite clever, but he's also clearly outmatched from the outset.
It's true, but interesting enough, it's not. Well, maybe that'd be too much spoiler alert. It's not Javier Bardem's character who gets him in the end.
Right. That is basically a spoiler.
Sorry, spoilers.
I guess if you've been listening to this podcast for this long, you should know there is a spoiler alert. Outstanding.
There's a standing spoiler alert. But it's kind of hard to just like give a full summary of the story, because so much of it is him running and the other characters chasing, and different parts of the story coming to light as you go.
And there's lots of clever suspense stuff, like all the stuff in the hotel where he hides the money in the ductwork, and he takes a room from the other side. So he knows that the room is taken, or he knows that they'll track him to the room. But he still manages to get the money out safely without giving away his position.
Yeah. And there are several shotgun gunfights, which are quite good. Now, wasn't there a Mythbusters episode where they talk about a shotgun silencer? Did I make that up in my mind?
Maybe.
Because I know this film came out and was very popular, and a bunch of folks were talking about the shotgun silencer that Javier Bardem's character uses.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember. I thought there was like a Mythbusters episode, and I forgot to look it up.
Was it about that, or was it about the pneumatic bolt gun?
Oh, maybe there was like a two-parter. I think I have to look that up.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up and see, because I feel like that's exaggerated.
Yeah.
Not that it wouldn't necessarily be used as a lethal weapon, but I feel like its power as a weapon is somewhat overblown.
Yeah.
It's also not revealed why he uses that. There's kind of an allusion to using that kind of a thing to stun cattle when you're slaughtering them.
Or to kill cattle.
Right. So it's there's that allusion to people being like cattle, or him viewing people like cattle, but it's not the most practical of weapons.
Because you got to carry a heavy can around with compressed air, and
he doesn't use like an excuse to explain to anybody why he's carrying it around, so he kind of sticks out like, oh yeah, the guy carrying the big tank.
Yeah,
I guess the deputy in the beginning thinks that it might be oxygen.
Yeah, it carries like an oxygen tank.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really know what it is. He's talking on the phone right before he is killed, and he's like, you'll have to take a look at it. You'd think that would kind of show up in a wanted poster or something, like carries around a can of compressed air with a hose.
Is that deputy who's killed in the beginning in the same precinct as the sheriff, or is it a different county? I wasn't clear on that.
I wasn't clear on that either. I wasn't sure. I want to say it was a different county.
I feel like it is too, because they never reference it. Him and his deputy.
Well, I think they reference it briefly, but it's not like if there was like a death in the department, I feel like they would be a lot more gung ho about capturing the bad guy than they were. They're kind of lackadaisical in a way.
Laid back. What's the next important plot point we need to touch on?
Well, eventually, the corporate guys in charge of the drug running want the killing to stop because it's causing too much attention to their plans. And so this one corporate guy hires Woody Harrelson's character
Carson to go Wales
to put a stop to it. And soon after that, there's a gunfight between Josh Brolin's character and Javier Bardem's character, in which case Josh Brolin's character really kind of does well for himself, is being kind of against a professional killer, and actually wounds Javier Bardem's character. And but Josh Brolin ends up so beat up that he ends up in a Mexican hospital, where Woody Harrelson's character meets him and tries to make him a deal. In which case he says, "You can call me when at this hotel Well, waiting for Woody Harrelson's character is Javier Bardem, and he is killed in the hotel room. And Javier Bardem talks to Josh Brolin over the phone, and basically shape things up for the final showdown, where Josh Brolin says, I can still, well, basically that he can still get away, and that don't go after my wife. I'm going to come after you. And Javier Bardem is like, I'm just going to go to you. I want to take out your wife. Which kind of shapes it up for that final showdown.
Mm-hmm. Basically, he has to confront him before he can go and kill his wife up in Odessa.
Right. So, Josh Brolin leaves the hospital, manages to get back into the United States, and calls his wife and has them going to meet him in San Antonio.
Or El Paso, wasn't it?
Was it El Paso?
I think they were going to meet in El Paso. Ultimately, they meet in El Paso.
El Paso. Anyway, well, it's the Mexican cartel finds out where they're meeting and ambushes Josh Brolin there. And Josh Brolin is killed in that fight. And Javier Bardem has killed Woody Harrelson's character, but also goes to the CEO's office or whatever and kills him too, which I'm not sure why. I guess out of revenge or something. And then
he's just kind of an unstoppable force.
Yeah. So then you kind of have the sad moments that Tommy Lee Jones finally finds Josh Brolin's character, but he is dead. And Tommy Lee Jones at this point will go into a crime scene, and it's the first crime scene he's visited since the beginning of the film. Mm-hmm. When you find the initial crime scene, and he's looking around for Anton Sugar, the assassin,
mm-hmm.
and he doesn't find him, but he kind of really figures he's there because he knows that the lock got blown out with his special air gun,
his hallmark signature.
And there is a clip of Javier Bardem under the bed, so you know that he's there as well, and you're just kind of wondering, is there going to be a shootout here?
Was he under the bed or was he behind the door?
I'm not sure. He is hiding in the room.
Yeah, he's hiding in the room somewhere.
Somewhere in there. And
because the sheriff doesn't turn on any lights. He just has the light from the door. He never closes the door.
Right.
So he could be behind the door. He could be under the bed.
But he just sits down and kind of just sits there. And Javier Bardem doesn't pop out with his shotgun and shoot him.
Yeah, the film cuts away to another scene.
They kind of just have the stalemate type deal.
Yeah, where they're in the same room. And
yeah.
There's no showdown, which is kind of like the most anti-Western kind of climax imaginable. You've got your one cowboy character who's killed by characters off screen. He's killed off screen after we've spent the whole movie following his exploits, and by a bunch of characters who don't even matter, who aren't part of the story as a whole or at large.
Yeah,
they're not main characters at all. And the main lawman and the main villain meet for a kind of showdown, but they don't even see each other.
Yeah, well, Javier Bardem does see him, but they just kind of let each other pass. They don't.
Like ships.
They don't have that. They don't have that showdown. And then you kind of cut to Josh Brolin's wife's character, burying her mother, and then going home and meeting Javier Bardem's character, Anton Sugar, and they had this conversation about why is he there, and because apparently he made a promise to Josh Brolin's character that he would.
Yeah,
and so he's there.
Set up for the showdown.
And this is kind of like the closest thing you have to a showdown in the end of the film, is the wife and the assassin. And
he does make an exception to his rule. He gives her the option to have a coin toss.
And he gives her that same option. But she, unlike the gas attendant, refuses to call it. Which then they kind of cut to him leaving the house.
Yeah, and checking his boots to see if there's any blood stains.
So you can, I guess, I mean, it does seem like is he checking his boots for bloodstains, or is he just checking his boots because he's just a weird character?
Yeah.
Did he kill this woman? Did she impress him with her spunk? I feel like that was a very ambiguous ending there.
Mm-hmm.
Although he probably did kill her. He's killed everybody else in the movie, so
it seems likely to me because I think he's shown checking his boots after other killings.
Yeah.
In the film, but it is kind of like a moral showdown where her character, he kind of, his speech to his victims they always say, "You don't have to do this," and his response is always, "Something in your life brought you to this moment where I'm sitting here across from you, and you've been traveling all this way just to meet me." Like, it's almost kind of like fate. He's arguing, this is destiny. This is the world that we live in, and I'm just a part of that system, that world. And her character, by refusing to play in his game, is forcing his hand a little bit and saying, "No, there's no chance. You're making a choice to kill me or not to kill me."
Yeah.
And that choice is you and on you alone. Which I think is an interesting juxtaposition. It's a moral showdown instead of a physical one.
Yeah, thinking about it, that does make for an interesting ending for a Western.
Mm-hmm.
Though I have to say, I probably wanted the more violent showdown. And I found myself wanting Javier Bardem's character to get what's coming to him, like to get killed in the end,
Yeah, so as the film ends, he's driving away in a station wagon.
Yeah.
And he gets sideswiped by someone running a stop sign, very badly injured, but not killed. And the film ends with him walking away.
Like hobbling away with his bone hanging out of his arm.
Uh-huh. And then there's some business with Tommy Lee Jones retiring, visiting his uncle, I guess, is the guy that he goes and visits. At
first I thought it was his dad, but then I realized it wasn't. I'm not sure who it was.
Someone.
I guess it was a family member.
They kind of talk about the horrors of the violence of the present day, and the older gentleman kind of counters with the horrors of the violence of the past.
It's like it's always been here.
And then the film concludes with the sheriff retired, and he's at home with his wife talking about some dreams he had about his father. There's a lot of poetic imagery that's quite Cormac McCarthy. It's very Cormac McCarthy work. Yes.
The whole film is the whole story is very Cormac McCarthy.
It's hard to summarize.
It is.
I think it's so interesting though that the film begins with the villain being captured and ends with him walking away free. It's kind of the opposite of the traditional Western.
There are kind of a few of those kind of bookends in this film, though. It definitely has a beginning and ending, though it doesn't have an ending that we would necessarily normally appreciate. Right. Because the sheriff starts off in the morning with his wife having breakfast, and then ends with him having breakfast with his wife. They have kind of a bookending of his monologue in the beginning, his monologue in the ending. So there's definitely that closure of the story.
Yeah. But it's not a comforting closure.
Not at all. No.
I kind of was thinking when he got hit by that wagon that he was going to be a victim of his own, nihilism.
That fate that he keeps preaching about. Right, it's going to catch up with him, but it doesn't, and
not
he keeps
really.
marching on. He kind of he kind of turns into like this monster character in many ways. It just keeps coming after you.
Yeah, very much so. It reminds me
it's a good movie.
Michael Myers in the Halloween franchise a little bit. He's just kind of this
it just keeps on coming
shape.
Yeah. Can't seem to kill the monster. No, I enjoyed the film. It was a good film. But I don't feel like it was a particularly special Western to end the series on.
Yeah. And it's interesting, a lot of at the time the film was really well received. So it gets something like 80 awards, including sweeping up at the Cannes Film Festival and at the Oscars. So pretty much the top of its game.
Isn't it still on AFI 100 or am I mistaken on that? I don't know if it's on. It's definitely in the top 10 best Westerns. I think people still call it
on a lot of lists.
The top on the list of Westerns. But I feel like you could kind of get the same feeling and even a better feeling if you just watched Fargo, which is also by the Coen brothers.
Yeah, I'm a much bigger fan of Fargo than I am of this.
Yeah.
Although I didn't dislike this film. It's a very strong piece of work. Maybe even a masterpiece. But I don't know. For some reason, it doesn't resonate with me in the way that other films in their canon do, like Fargo and like True Grit and Raising Arizona.
I really like True Grit.
And the remake of True Grit, of course. What's that other film of theirs? They have a bunch. Blood Simple is one that I love. Their first film. So they have
want to see.
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That's the one I was thinking of.
Oh Brother, yeah, that is a good one. I really want to see the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is another Western.
So it's nothing against the film itself or the filmmakers. I just, for some reason, it doesn't resonate with me the way.
Yeah.
Or even having read other Cormac McCarthy, this isn't a story of Cormac McCarthy's that particularly resonates with me.
Have you read the book? I
haven't read the book. Did. This is my only experience of the story.
Okay. Which is actually a pretty true or a pretty close adaptation of the book. I was kind of surprised.
You expected them to go in a different direction?
Just in a number of books versus movies type thing, you kind of see the movie more dynamic and more kind of going off in what audiences more expect versus Cormac McCarthy in any of his works.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a tough one to adapt. Is Cormac McCarthy. Yeah. It's interesting though. I think of the book as an older book, but it's actually published in 2005, I think.
Yeah, it's 2005 or 2006. It's very soon before the movie was made.
Yeah, it's relatively it makes me wonder how long Cormac McCarthy spent writing the book versus how long the Coen brothers took making the film. Because he's I think he's well known for being slow.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But
I think Blood Meridian took him something like 10 or 15 years to write.
That doesn't surprise me. That's a very slow book.
That's a whopper.
Yeah. So,
although No Country is a much shorter book.
Yeah, very fast-paced book. As far as the history goes, I know at this point in many of our episodes, we had kind of have a timeline of the decade. Yeah. But I kind of just decided not to do that for this one, since Ben and I were talking about just a minute ago about how you need about 20 or 30 years to really have any good history coming out of a particular time period. And I haven't found a whole lot on the early 2000s anyway. I'm sure there's stuff out there. A lot of it is there's a lot of partisan stuff in it.
Yeah, it's very distorted by our current perspective.
Our current view, our current perspective.
We're not really able to get a historical perspective on it because it's so recent.
I kind of just skipped it for the early 2000s. I know there's quite a few big touchstones. There's, of course, the 2000 election. There's 9/11, which definitely have shaped our perspective for the future in the 21st century. But as far as the history goes, I kind of just I'll let this one slide. This is much more of the modern time.
What do you think about it in terms of the history of the Western?
This film was probably I don't think this film was the best choice as a seminal example of the 21st century. I feel like this film looked back a lot more towards previous Westerns and previous Coen brothers movies.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of showing a new hill to cross in the 21st century.
Yeah. But that's kind of a pattern that you see a lot in Westerns of this era of our time, or Westerns that are kind of bleak and sad and pessimistic. Do you think do you think that's going to change as the century moves on? Do you think the Western will continue to be this kind of dark genre, or do you think it's there'll be a revitalization of the kind of action and heroic adventure of things like Tombstone or Silverado?
I've seen a few films that I kind of had high hopes for as far as making it the heroic action adventure genre, like two films that I was looking forward to, and both let me down. One was The Lone Ranger.
Yep.
And I know you know that movie. The other one was Jonah Hex, kind of adaptation of comic book Western. And both have been pretty dismal failures, actually. And Jonah Hex was just as depressing as any other Western, also starring Josh Brolin, actually. But that had nothing to do with how depressing it was. But
if anything, Josh Brolin's character is kind of the heroic cowboy figure in this Western. He's the man facing down the odds, and he has this kind of they sometimes call it the save the cat moment, where he does a nice thing that he doesn't have to do so that we like him as a character, where he goes back and gives the guy water. And that's actually kind of his like Achilles heel, is if he hadn't done that, he could have made gotten a much better start.
he probably would have died because he didn't know that there was a tracker on the money.
That's true. Yeah.
He would have been just like hanging out in his trailer, and Harvey Bardem would have just showed up taking the money.
It's possible.
So anyway, but as I've seen some really great movies in the 21st century for the Western, but they're not very upbeat. There's some funny parts in them, but not very upbeat. Like True Grit, I really enjoyed True Grit, also by the Coen brothers, and also had Josh Brolin in it. And I really enjoyed Hostiles.
Yeah,
it was a really well done movie,
not
starring Christian Bale.
But a really strong piece of work.
Yeah. So I think the Western is still going to continue to be made in the 21st century, but I don't think it's ever going to get that popularity that it had. That action
you don't
adventure.
Think there'll be a reinvention?
And the reinvention, I think, is it almost changing genres. I think it's kind of gone into in the 1980s. We kind of had that cowboy character go into Star Wars as a sci-fi adventure, or in Indiana Jones as an archaeologist adventure,
right? And
various other comic bookish kind of characters. Since then, I don't think we get the Western motif. But
I'm not sure.
Just
I feel like we probably will see it again. I think somebody will come at it from a new angle and come up with a new way of looking at it. And it'll be a different kind of perspective, more relevant to whatever culture comes after us.
Well, I mean, if you're considering like samurai movies, like Akira Kurosawa's Samurai, and that kind of to us, the cowboy is kind of that Ronin character that he was so famous for. But that I wouldn't consider samurai movies westerns, but that same archetype would be in there. Is that kind of what you're referring to, or?
I think right now, science fiction is kind of a big genre, and fantasy is a big genre because we live in a world dominated by technology. But I think seasonally there are always times where one generation is kind of being outmoded by technology, and I think our generation will have that in a different form. And I think when that happens, we'll look back to the Western, because the Western is kind of, we were talking before the podcast started about how autumn is sometimes a difficult season, but also a season of change. And the Western is very much an autumnal genre to me. It's very much a transition point in history where you're kind of exploring the frontier of the West to get away from the civilization, to get away from the Industrial Revolution. And so I think that setting will always have a place in a society that feels like it's being outmoded by its technology. And I think that's definitely where we're headed in a society where our technology is updating so fast. We're going to face all kinds of changes as a result of that, in the same way that people in the West were facing change with the telegraph and the railroad and the ever encroaching approach of civilization ever westward. Change is in the wind. And I think any civilization where there's a lot of change, the Western still has a place. Still has something to say. But I could be wrong, and it could be played out as a genre and kind of reside in this position where it's been for a few years now, where it's kind of a place for more cerebral adult films and not really mainstream successes.
Right. I think I don't think it'll ever come back as the action adventure that we kind of saw in the 50s and 60s. But it has gained you're right, it has gained new life as far as the more cerebral kind of stories like Hostiles in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's kind of just where the genre has turned to in modern times.
Yeah, I kind of disagree. I think we'll see a revitalization of it in a different form, an unexpected way. I think it'll. I'm not saying it'll be samurai or a different genre. I'm saying I think somebody will come to the genre with a fresh pair of eyes, and we'll find a way to make it exciting and relevant to today's audiences.
Yeah. Make it fun again.
But
True Grit wasn't fun.
If there's anything a historian should know, it's that predicting the future is a tough call.
Yeah, I don't think historians really do that.
Yeah. We're not crystal balls here on the Popstorian podcast.
No.
So do you remember any fashion trends from 2008 or 2007?
Any fashion trends?
Yeah. So we sometimes talk about trends, stuff that are happening in the decades that we reference.
In 2008, Facebook was becoming very popular.
Yeah.
I know social media had already been well established by the 21st century, but I know I joined Facebook in 2009, and as one of those first generation types thing. You remember they had like Farmville and they had Flair.
Mm-hmm.
You remember Flair?
I don't. I remember Farmville though.
Yeah, Facebook was very different at the time.
Yeah,
and I think that's interesting to kind of note, just how our society has changed just in 12 years.
Yeah.
Because now we get all of our news on like Twitter and Facebook and
right.
Like,
I was thinking about how at that time the fedora was making a big comeback.
Really? I mean,
Yeah.
I did have a fedora.
It suddenly seemed like everybody was wearing a fedora in 2008.
Right. Or a what is that other smaller hat? It's not a fedora, though many people consider it a fedora.
Yeah,
It's actually
there's another word for it.
A triblet,
Mm-hmm.
triblet, something of that nature. The smaller hat.
Yeah, the smaller hat.
It's actually
Became very
I'd actually
fashionable.
read a fashion article about hat wearing, and if you were a smaller person, then you should wear a smaller hat. And fedoras were kind of a medium-sized hat, so if you're a medium-sized person, then you could wear that. So that's the fashion for our No Country for Old Men type deal.
That's the cowboy hat for 2008.
Yeah. Although they did wear a lot of cowboy hats in the movie.
They do. And boots.
And boots. Boots are a big deal in the movie.
And I guess landscape. Kind of a throwback to John Ford or Peckinpah, the way they use landscape in the film.
I'd say probably closer to Peckinpah, who was, of course, inspired by Ford. But I don't know, the way they use clouds in the film.
Mm-hmm.
That's very Fordian.
I'm not sure that that Peckinpah would have liked this film. I'm sure I've said it before on the podcast when we talked about The Wild Bunch, but his philosophy was, I didn't want you to like the film. I wanted you to take a long look into your own soul. I'm not sure that this film inspires that kind of introspection, and maybe that's why I
Well, there are some deeply philosophical moments.
There's a lot of deep philosophical
few.
themes, but I'm not sure that it inspired me as somebody watching it to think deeper or to look at myself in a different way, the way that Peckinpah's work does. But that could be just me.
I was gonna say maybe just you have a special connection with Peckinpah films.
Yeah, let us know if No Country for Old Men changed the way that you think about yourself or your philosophy or the way you look at the world. If it challenged you in any ways.
Let us know on Twitter, on Facebooks, Instagram, email.
popstorian@gmail.com. We would love to hear what you think about this and tell us what you thought about our series. Season 1. Westerns by the Decade. Hard to believe, Chris.
I think that's a good ending.
Alrighty. Well, until next time, so long from me, Ben.
And from Chris.
And we'll see you. Happy trails.
Thanks for listening to the Popstorian podcast. Be sure to subscribe. You can find us online at popstorian.com or on Facebook and Twitter. Tune in next time for more of the history of popular culture.